This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek, and we wanted to talk on this show about the rise of fascism, right-wing forces in Germany, the AfD, and what is going to happen with the fall of the Schulz government and the program and agenda of the AfD, where it came from, and what is going to be happening in Germany with its rise to power. And joining us is Ellie Koch. She is a trade unionist and former member of UAW 4811 at the University of California. So welcome to our show.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
So Ellie, first of all, why don't you talk about the AfD? It's a large and growing party in Germany. Where did it come from, and what does it represent, and what is going to happen if it comes to power in Germany?
Yeah, that's a pretty large story, despite them only being around for about 10 years, a decade. So they were founded in 2013 in February, I think. And back then it was not quite clear where they were headed, right? So they were kind of a hodgepodge of the economic liberals and some right wing forces and some even further right wing people. And one of their core demands was that Germany leave the EU and adopt an individual, basically go back to the German mark and like abandon the euro. Um, However, obviously this did not come into existence. However, what happened afterwards is that the party moved further and further to the right. So pretty early on, the furthest right-wing forces, I would call them, around Björn Höcke, got a lot of traction because Höcke himself was founding the branch in Thuringia. And so he made sure that his supporters were well equipped in this one state and kind of branched out from there. And he is now one of the driving forces behind this party moving further and further towards fascism. And I would argue they're probably almost there already, if not already there. Um, the only thing I think that is missing right now to call this full on fascism is the boots on the ground organized fascistic terror. But we have like individual terroristic acts that come from the right, so that basically everything is there. They just, if they wanted to, they just needed to organize it better, I think. Yeah.
And the rise of fascism internationally has been very much connected with immigration, mass immigration, and U.S. war in Iraq, Syria, Libya. How has
Mm.
that immigration going into Germany, into Austria, into Europe affected the rise of the AfD? It's called Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for Germany.
Exactly. So basically, what happened in the mid 2010s, so around 2015, 2016, is that because of the war in Syria, many Syrian migrants came to Germany trying to escape that dire situation back in their home country. And at that time, we had fairly, in comparison to now, a fairly liberal policy towards them and welcomed them in. However, as right wing fascists do, the AfD and their supporters immediately were agitating against them. And so it was not only the AfD, but there was also a street movement, Pegida, so the patriotic Europeans against the Islamization of the Occident. Very strange name. However, they were able to mobilize thousands and thousands in German cities to the streets, Monday by Monday. And it got so far that there were actual mobs going through Chemnitz, I believe, yeah, and practicing mob violence against people they deemed to be not German enough, so to speak, of a different race or ethnicity, at least if they thought so. Yeah, and AfD was very, very quick in kind of canalizing these protests into their own agenda and then using that as a means to further their status among the population.
And
It's,
Germany, of course, has
yeah.
invited immigrant workers in. There are a large number of Turkish workers who were brought in, who are in auto factories and other industries without Germany. I mean, there's a big percentage of Germany that is now immigrant workers or previously immigrants
Yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
brought.
I mean, from the 60s onwards, like Italian workers, Turkish workers, many of the Syrians that have come since 2015 are now working in essential jobs, like they're frontline workers in healthcare, for example. So many people who are trying to make arguments that we need the people, so to speak, they're always referring to those healthcare workers. What would we do if we don't have their labor, instead of saying like it's generally bad to agitate against immigrants, right?
And the Schultz government, the Social Democrats and the Conservative Party, they, of course, have supported U.S. intervention. They support NATO. And what is their response to this rise of fascism and immigrant bashing, xenophobia?
Fishing at the right fringe. So they are just moving further and further to the right. They are using language that AFD used in the mid 2010s now just openly in general. You might have even heard from in the English speaking discourse this word remigration now. This is a term that apparently AFD kind of, or the European fascists kind of coined, which they think of bringing the migrants back to where they come from, which, I mean, migrants is for them everybody who they don't deem German enough. And I say that with a purpose, because they also have now proposed plans to strip people of their German citizenship. That was revealed already last year.
Sounds very similar to Trump and the
Mm-hmm.
Republican Party. Even if you're born in the country, you're going to lose your citizenship, even though it's in the Constitution. Actually, it came about in the Constitution as a result of the fight against slavery and the right of slaves to be citizens if they were born here.
Yeah, and I mean, interesting is too weak a word, but like one interesting thing is that the German fascists are well connected not only within Europe but also to Trump. So several of them have been seen at Trump speeches last year, I believe, listening to what he was saying and what his supporters and, yeah, people within the Project 2025, I suppose, were spewing at events in New York.
And Bannon, of course, has been to Europe, been to Germany, and uniting these right wing parties. How seriously is this connection taken by the working class in Germany? Is there an anti fascist movement? And is there a connection with the whole role of the government in actually exacerbating xenophobia by their positions, saying that the problem are the immigrants and not the system that led to massive migration of immigrants?
I'll start with the government. Obviously, the government would never say the system is a problem. Um, so, of course, they think it's fine. There are some voices on the left, especially within the left party, that argue that we have to redistribute the wealth. However, currently they have made themselves not really credible in the way that they have not shown solidarity with Palestine, for instance. So there's a lot of international politics playing into this as well. So they are losing kind of like they're on a losing battle in that way. And the other parties in parliament, as I tried to allude to earlier, they are kind of playing into the hands of AFD by adopting their rhetoric, saying we have to limit migration, we have to make it more safe, everything's unsafe. Nothing is unsafe. Like there is crime, of course, but it's not disproportionately linked to like migrants, however broad you want to define it. But that's what AFD uses to advance a division within the working class and within the populace in general. On the other hand, people are recognizing more and more that fascism is a threat that we have to take seriously. I think the first occurrence of that was after last year, around this time, a investigation revealed that AFD and some conservative politicians and some called Identitäre Bewegung, so the identitary movement, which is also a right-wing movement, kind of separatists. They had a meeting and had several meetings prior to that already, but this one was the one that was revealed to the public in Potsdam, where they discussed their plans of how to remigrate people, how to strip them of citizenship, basically a second Wannsee-Konferenz, so what the Nazis did in Potsdam, of all places, as well. So And that really shook people. They read this, and after the new year, protests started popping up everywhere in Germany, from the big cities to the small towns. Um, Back then, I still lived in the countryside, so even in the town that I lived in, that has like 12,000 inhabitants, there was an 800 people protest. So I think that's significant. And then this kind of translated into the big civil disobedience action and the big protest at the AfD Federal Convention in June, where in the morning 7,000 people came to block access to the convention and were partially successful but largely unsuccessful due to police intervention and due to it being not planned super well, since the coalition that organized this mass civil disobedience had only formed 3 months prior, and it was like very haphazard. And some like the convention had to be delayed by a few hours at least. So that's a success as well. And then after that early morning action, there was a 70,000 people protest. So people were moving through the streets of Essen to a parking lot, I think it's usually close by the convention center, to protest and have hear some speeches, and the groups also could present themselves there that were participating in that.
And one of the things the United States has wanted to do is to break off Germany from Russia, to
Mm-hmm,
stop trade with Russia, not take the oil from Russia. And that has had devastating consequences economically for Germany as
mm-hmm.
far as the economic situation, a competition of German products, having to import American liquid nitrogen and basically become more dependent on US capitalism, US imperialism. What was the position of the AfD in regard to shutting off economic trade with Russia and also supporting militarization and supporting Ukraine?
Yeah, so they're taking a very pro-Russian stance in comparison to other parties, which is interesting, right? But not so much if you think about how well Trump is connected to Russia. So, um, and they they try to position themselves as interested in peace negotiations in Ukraine, and the whole economic crisis has obviously given them a boost, because now they can use this fear of, not only fear, some people actually lost their jobs, some people cannot pay their rent, some people cannot pay for groceries, right? So they're using that and say, look, this is on the immigrants, right? Although obviously it's not. um, and some of the AfD politicians have had meetings in Russia and in Belarus, so they're also very tightly connected to that part of the world as well.
And the unions in Germany are quite strong. The work councils. There was recently a mass strike of Volkswagen, which is a large employer. They're talking about closing down factories in Germany. There may be a full-fledged strike there. First of all, have the unions opposed militarization and war? And what is the relationship of the unions to Schultz and these political parties in Germany?
And the unions and the political parties are that like that tight. However, there are some efforts by unionists to divest from the military machine, so to speak. So there is a network of unionists that is agitating against this. Obviously, there are left-leaning organizations who are trying to also point out these connections. Um, but I feel like it's smaller than in the US, like from like scale wise, if I compare it to what's been done in US unions in comparison to here. Um, and the structure is very different to the union, like UAW 4811 that I was in the US. There are efforts, but they're not taken seriously, I would say. However, also on the upside, there was a really big peace protest in Berlin. It was on 3rd of October, so day of reunification of the reunification of Germany. And that was called, and now we're getting very into the weeds of German politics, by Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, one of the splinter products of Die Linke.
Die Linke was a left party that formed that included East German communists and German socialist German communists. Die Linke.
Yeah, exactly. And back in the day when they formed, to have been a or like the, people were excited to join this. This would be a cool opportunity to really bring left politics forward, and it didn't come to pass as they hoped it would happen. They have also moved further to the center slash to the right. And yeah, the latest problem, as I already alluded to, was their support for weapons deliveries to Israel.
And that's a major issue. Germany has said that they wanted to educate people about fascism, the results of Nazism, extermination of Jews, and many, many other people in concentration camps. And they've used these laws apparently to repress people who are supporting the Palestinians against their extermination and genocide.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what the position of the AFD is to that, because these people who are being repressed, many of them are Jews in Germany,
That,
opposing
yeah,
war.
that is absolutely correct. So our free speech laws are different from the free speech laws in the US. There is a like an exclusion for anything that would den Holocaust relativieren. So if you say anything that would question the position of the Holocaust in history, basically. So as this singular event that cannot be repeated. I mean, that's the problem. Like, that's what they think. Like, it cannot be repeated. It's so singular that nothing would ever come remotely close, and we as Germans have to contend with that, and because we are the guilty party in perpetrating this. And this is more or less explicitly only the Nazi repression and murder of Jewish people, not of all the other people they murdered, which is also kind of interesting. Like, nobody ever talks about not questioning the position of murdering all the Sintice and Romnia people, or all the communists, or that doesn't matter. It's
Or
only about
gays and lesbians were also murdered
and
by
exactly,
the Nazis.
exactly, and unionists, right? Any like anybody who's not a Nazi. Um, However, the these laws are used to, in conjunction with the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, to stifle all critique of Israel as a state, as the current political leadership, as in all the programs they ever did. Like, anything that criticizes Israel now falls under this umbrella of it's not protected by free speech anymore. And officially, this is not a law. That's the wild part about this. But the parliament has recently adopted a measure, or not a measure.
No.
It's basically an opinion of the parliament, is what it translates to. That they follow this definition that now everything that is criticism of Israel is also counted as anti-Semitic and therefore punishable, basically. And while this is not a law, so theoretically it shouldn't have any impact. It's just an opinion of the parliament, right? A resolution of the parliament, but they have used the same parliamentary opinion to basically outlaw BDS, and BDS movement is still trying to legally fight this, but it meant effectively that they couldn't organize in Germany legally anymore. And the same is happening to anybody in solidarity with Palestine right now, especially in Berlin, but also in other cities. People are facing brutal police repression. Dogs have been used against them. Police has beaten up people.
So
So
in the Zionists, the Netanyahu regime have said that anyone that criticizes that regime is an anti-Semite.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that same argument. But what you're saying is that in Germany, the government there and the parties are saying that if you criticize Israel, you are an anti-Semite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What else is there to say? I mean but that's what they do in the US too, right? Like, it's the whole argument of, oh, you're not a real Jew because you're criticizing Israel or something like that.
You're a self-hating Jew
Self-hating, yeah, that's the
if
word,
you
right?
criticize Israel, the genocide of Israel, and which the German government is now implementing against people who are critical of the genocide that's going on in
Hmm.
Gaza and in Palestine.
More or less, yeah. So they they have even tried to make this part of the immigration process. So some states have tightened their questionnaire and included questions about the legitimacy of Israel. So what do you think of the legitimacy of Israel? Like, tick a box.
So if you're opposed to a Zionist state, a Jewish state, then you are anti-Semitic and
Yeah, and
not
therefore you
eligible
cannot
for.
obtain citizenship.
And what's the relationship of AFD to these positions?
They have cheered when the Bundestag, our parliament, yeah, passed this resolution. So they are very much on board with Israel.
So they're Zionists. They support,
Yeah,
and didn't the Nazis actually work with the Zionists? They invited Adolf Eichmann, the Zionist, to Palestine to get the Nazis to support the idea of a Jewish state, and all the Jews could leave Germany. And the Zionists work with the Nazis to allow Zionists to go to Israel, Palestine at that time, but not other Jews.
oh, I'm actually, yeah, that might very well be the case. I have actually not heard about this, but I will look into this after our call. But because I know that there were connections, but I did not know if this was the person Adolf Eichmann or somebody
They
else.
gave medals, awards. Lenny
Oh my
Brenner,
God.
Zionism
Yeah.
Age of Dictators. The Nazis gave medals for their collaboration with the Zionists at that time.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
So
Seems
this
very much.
relationship between Nazism and Zionism has a long continuity.
Mm,
And also in the United States, the Zionists were against protest against Roosevelt, who prevented Jews who were escaping the Holocaust from coming into the United States.
yeah, I mean,
They said that
it
they shouldn't
starts.
have protests. Yeah.
It started even earlier, right? Wasn't it the what's his name, the right hand of Herzl, who wrote the anti-Semites will be our biggest supporters in the Zionist project or something like that?
They had a similar ideology. In
Yeah,
other words, the Zionists had a racist, fascist ideology that the Jews did not belong in Germany. They belonged in Palestine in their new state, which
yeah,
the Zionists, and that's the reason they invited Adolf Eichmann to come to Palestine and support the idea of the establishment of a Zionist state, a Jewish state where Jews
yeah.
could live. And this history in Germany, the position of the parties, it seems like all the parties, all the major parties are going along with this. Is there any opposition politically in Germany to this support for
Um,
Zionism?
yeah, so there was recently this let's call it drama because I think that's what it's counted as online, but I mean obviously there's more behind it within the left party, right? So one of the big figures in pro-Palestine organizing in Germany, Ramzi Kilani, is was also part of the German Left Party. And obviously, he's been at all the protests, speaking there with his story of his father and siblings having been killed by the Zionist state already in 2014, I think.
What happened to him and his family? What is the story about?
So his father and siblings were in Palestine when they bombed it, and they died. So as far as I know, like that's the short of it. And he was in Germany, he himself. So he, as far as I'm aware, yeah. And so he was a member of the Left Party and tried to through protests like the wider society, but obviously was also active within the party still. And the more center right leaning people within the left party were agitating against him, and then ultimately now shunned him from the party or like excluded him or whatever. And another former member of the parliament, of the federal parliament, has now, I think today or like yesterday, left the party over this because yeah, she says that's not a party I can be involved in anymore.
And there are a large number of immigrant workers. They're in unions. Past president of the union, the largest workers union in Germany, was a Turkish German. Is there any mobilization education campaign among these immigrant workers around defense of immigrants and against the rise of fascism in Germany?
Yeah, it's so we are currently mobilizing for with the same coalition that tried to block the last federal convention of AFD. Um, and we are mobilizing very, I say we because I'm involved in that here, but we are mobilizing very broadly with the unions, with other organizations, and so on and so forth. However, it's rather difficult to make a credible mobilization if you know that you are also mobilizing within the Zionist groups, because a lot of the anti-fascist groups in Germany are very pro-Zionist. And obviously, as an immigrant, you don't want to be found by Zionists who go around to protests and
Because the Zionists attack
are
the
violent.
immigrants? Is that what's
They
happening?
might be. They might be. They're very, yeah, it's hard to say what they do and what they don't do, you know?
So there's a danger to immigrants from the Zionists in Germany.
Yeah, at least that's what we're fearing could happen. And so that's why within this coalition, we try to make very sure that we have a consensus on which we're organizing, that no violence is perpetrated against people who are in solidarity with us, and that especially extends to that, or that we are standing on the grounds of international humanitäres Menschenrecht, humanitarian human rights law.
International solidarity with workers around the world.
No, because it's not a workers' coalition necessarily. So
I
it's broad. It's a left united front coalition, but it's not only for workers. Everybody is supposed to be able to join.
So the Zionists in Germany, are they linked up with the AfD?
Partly, yeah. The networks are very unclear to me in that regard.
Politically, they're aligned. If the AfD is supporting
Yeah,
attacks
exactly.
on critics
So
of Israel,
yeah,
then obviously the Zionists in Germany like that because they have
yeah.
support of the AfD.
Yeah, exactly. But they have support of all the parties. So like they are in a very cushy position right now. Um, Police and politics support them, basically.
And economically, there are massive budget cuts in the United States. The program of Trump,
Mhm.
Project 2025, is going to lead to destruction of public services. That's what he wants to do. Public education, public health care. Those kind of attacks are now beginning to take place in Germany. Is that what's happening with the German structure now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been happening for a while. I think it kind of picked up steam now, partly because our government recently imploded, and we're still quite unsure what the hell just happened. Um, and now we also know that a chancellor lost the confidence vote, so they're going ahead with elections soon. And that was over the budget, supposedly. But then it was leaked that the Liberal Party, who kind of blew the coalition up, the ruling coalition, they kind of had a plan all along, and there was this strategy paper that was leaked, and yeah, it was wild. But before that already, there were budget cuts from the federal government that were kind of uh, scaled down and arrived in the towns and cities and whatnot. So that now all over Germany, people are trying to locally mobilize against budget cuts as well. So that is also an opportunity for better connection, because at least where I'm living right now, it's very apparent that the AfD is very in line with those budget cuts, of course, because like they are not interested in social like the social budget, the social safety net, any kind of public services is not on their agenda. They seem to be more interested in furthering, yeah, big capital and private companies.
And in the United States, the Musk, they're right-wing fascist, techno-fascist, who are supporting the fascist government. What's going on in Germany with the capitalists, the billionaires in Germany, the capitalist class? Because it seems they're being squeezed by U.S. imperialism, threat of tariffs, tariff war with Germany and Europe.
So the billionaires, they I recently learned that there used to be a tax for like a rich people tax, for a wealth tax, and apparently that was not in line with our constitution, and therefore the government back in the day was supposed to like renegotiate and write a better law and then reimpose it, but it's never been renegotiated and reimposed. So there's theoretically something somewhere in the ether that we could use to like use as a wealth tax. But obviously nobody wants to touch it because they're afraid that then jobs would go away or whatever. The people or the movements that are mobilizing against the budget cuts, they try to say, hey, we could impose a wealth tax, you know, and we just redistribute the wealth that is already there, because over the pandemic, like the rich people just got richer, and we have been squeezed by the pandemic, by the war, and the resulting problems with Russia and energy, and yeah.
And the Musk also is invested in Germany. He's built a plant, a Tesla plant in
Yes.
Berlin, which also he's fighting the union as he is in the United States. He's a union buster. And Sean Fain, actually, your former president, said he's a scab and a union buster and crosses picket lines. Vance actually crossed the picket line of my union, the News Guild in Pittsburgh Post Gazette, as a scab, broke the picket line. So it seems that in Germany, as far as American capital, they would like to bust the unions as well.
Yeah, I think so too. The, people have made fun of him for that as well, that he came to Germany and thought he could do whatever he wanted, not realizing that there are labor laws. But I'm pretty sure he realized that there were labor laws, he just didn't care, and is now trying to like play the money card and say, hey, the jobs will go away if you don't play according to my rules. The other interesting thing about this Tesla plant in Grünheide, outside of Berlin, is that they agreed on an area, and then of course he wanted to expand it further, and overall this expansionism, he has actually used too much water, so that now the surrounding villages and towns don't have enough water to use anymore.
Water is for his factory. That's all.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. But
um,
so people are angry about that, and
and
environmentalists and others.
I guess part of the reason also is that the German companies like Volkswagen and Mercedes and whatnot have been very late to the party of electric vehicles, especially in comparison to like the Chinese market or something. We are very far behind. And we have a big fossil fuel lobby here in Germany. There have been attempts, multiple attempts, at codifying laws to move from the fossil fuels to a more electric approach to vehicles, and they were all struck down by this very fossil lobby.
And what is the AFD's position on the Chinese and Chinese investment? Because now China is a major competitor. The United States is unable to compete with Chinese electric vehicles, EVs, and putting on major tariffs. And I understand Germany is doing the same thing because they can't
Yeah,
compete
indeed.
with China.
I wonder if it depends on who you ask in AFD, because there was a scandal in the summer when we had the European elections that one of the frontrunners for the AFD had actually colluded with China. Not he himself, but his closest employee. So he himself had colluded with China. He got elected anyways. He is now in parliament. Oh, again, I think he was in there before, if I recall correctly. And he's now running in Saxony to be part of the Bundestag, I think.
And what will happen if the AFD wins and gets in power and becomes the governing party in Germany?
As far as I'm aware, but this is just hearsay, so take this with a pinch of salt. They don't think that they will actually get majority this election, and they are basically preparing a project 2025 for 2029, so for the next elections. But I mean, that they're already preparing something like this is. And so, yeah, if they come into power, they will implement laws that first target the most vulnerable, and then target everybody else who is against them, and implement a fascistic regime, most likely. I'm sorry to say it that bluntly, but it reminds me very much of the situation in 1932-33, also with like the busted government, and yeah.
So the rise of fascism and this party, AFD, is very much connected to Trump and the plan for a program,
Hmm.
programmatic project to implement their program.
Yeah, and I mean they're connected all over Europe. Like we have Meloni in Italy, but she's apparently too liberal for the fascists in Italy because there was this attempt on her life recently. And then AFD for like for official means and purposes was excluded from the right-wing parliamentary faction in the European Parliament because of the yeah, I don't even know why exactly, but yeah, I don't think this is to be taken seriously. This is just something outwardly apparent, and like if they want to work together, they still work together, like behind the scenes, right?
Is the AFD in favor of the continuing the European community?
No, I mean they don't say that they want to bust the European Union, but that's essentially what it boils down to if you take their words seriously. Like more independence for the sovereign nation states, whatever, whatever.
And in Germany, the amount of money that Schultz and the government is giving to Ukraine, what is is the AFD in favor of that? And what is their opposition to continued war in Ukraine?
I mean, they want to invest it into Germany, but I'm not sure if they have ever said what exactly they want to do with it.
So they're not opposing the investment in the war in Ukraine, the AFD. Schultz has given a lot of money now. He says he wants to back up, make sure that Zelensky and that regime continues.
No, no, no. They are opposing it, and they would like to invest the money into Germany, but they just have. I don't know if they have ever been concrete about what they would like to invest in, because obviously on the city level and on the state level, they are still defunding all the social projects that the money could go into. So it's just not matching up what they say and what they want
So
to
the
do.
AFD is actually supporting these budget cuts
Yes.
that are attacking the working class in Germany.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or they're supporting those budget cuts.
Yeah.
So the situation of the working class movement in Germany, it seems that, like in the United States, there is no working class party in
Yes.
Germany.
That's true.
So there's no working class political alternative.
No, exactly. And I mean, you already see that in the way that I talked about this coalition against the AFD Federal Convention, because I said it's not a working class coalition because that's not how they would portray themselves. But I mean, obviously, that would be what it should be, right?
So there should be a working class party in
Yeah,
Germany
yeah,
that represents the interests of the working class.
yeah.
But the union leadership, like the union leadership in the United States, are in favor of capitalist policies.
Yes, I mean they are unions are intertwined with the capitalist state, right? Their jobs rely on the system continuing to work, and in Germany, because of the strong labor laws, are great, and it's good that we have them and that it was that people fought for them, but they're also curtailing what's possible for workers, for instance, in like in the way that they can legally strike, and when it becomes illegal, and what can be done about it then, and so on and so forth.
So it's a corporate structure of control of the
Yes.
working class in Germany, like the United States.
Yeah.
Although Trump is going to get rid of that structure, NLRB and all the other structures,
So
he
I
already
mean,
wants with that.
that's not good. Yeah.
Okay, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I think it's been useful, and I'm glad that it seems that actually that workers in the United States and workers in Germany face similar attacks as far as racism and attacks on immigrants. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's really an international struggle for workers in the United States and Germany, and also the rise of fascism.
And I think we should connect internationally but organize locally, right? That's what we always need to do.
Okay, thanks again for joining us. We've been talking with Ellie Koch. She is a former member of UAW 4811 and now is a unionist in Germany. Thanks for joining us.